Hello and welcome to Broad Street Hockey. I am Ryan Gilbert. Joining me today is Steve Jaco from Fly Hyperbole. What are we doing this afternoon, Steve?
I'm doing great, Gilbs. How are you? I'm in the middle. The Phils are playing. I got my Phils gear on right now. So I got Phil's Dodgers over here. I got you to talk about this whole Flyers coaching situation. So we're doing good. We're excited. We're ready to talk about all the sports.
Yeah, I see you peeking out the corner of your eye there. I think it's about bottom 8 or something right now for Phillies. So yeah, we'll keep an eye on that. But yeah, we just wanted to get something out here to you guys on the coaching situation because it's been a week and a half. It kind of feels longer. It feels like remember when John Tortorella was the Flyers head coach? Like, wow, what a wild time that was.
You know what really contributes to that feeling of like how long it feels like it's been is the fact that the team had off for like the entire week. Like
Yes.
it felt like before last night, it felt like it had been so damn long since I had seen some Flyers hockey. And then did I really see that much Flyers hockey last night? I'm not quite sure, but we saw something. Whether
We,
it could be considered hockey, I'm not sure.
yeah, there was hockey. It was good for the tanky. I was just hanging out and it was like 6 o'clock and I was like, oh shit, the Flyers played tonight. Right. We had the week off. Flyers are back now. But yeah, they had what like I think it was 15 games in 28 days in March and then like one game in 9 days here to begin April. Like I don't get it.
I don't understand the NHL schedule makers at all. They're just madmen, just
No,
complete lunatics.
doesn't make sense at all there. But
So
yeah, make sure you guys are subscribed here on the YouTube. Shout out to everyone watching on the YouTube. Shout out to everyone listening live afterwards on the podcast feed. Appreciate all you guys. Subscribe there on the YouTube, like and comment. Steve?
oh wait, never mind. I had an idea, and I'm gonna DM you on the side about what just happened there. But hey,
All right.
that's okay.
All right. Well, we have the subscribe button is down in the bottom right hand corner, I believe. So you can hit that to subscribe. Yeah, so make sure you do all that good stuff. Subscribe on Apple and Spotify. Leave us a 5-star rating and review there as well. Those help out a ton. And of course, make sure. All right, we don't have to make sure that that's on a break. They're on a break. They're on a break. So
They're on a
yeah,
break.
make sure.
Yeah,
Yeah, make sure you guys are subscribed to YouTube, the podcast, all that good stuff there. Yeah, we had a week without Flyers hockey. We're going to talk about Bradshaw. Friend of the show, Jason Martinez, had a good interview with Bradshaw, I believe, on the Flyers Daily on Thursday. Had a good conversation with Drysdale and Boucher on Friday as well. And something Bradshaw said in that interview, it seemed like he was really kind of thrown into the fire here. Like no one was expecting Tortorella to get fired before the end of the season, including Shaw. He was talking about how, yeah, he went from, getting the news that Tortorella was fired to becoming the guy and having to just change his mindset, change how he gets ready to prepare for games. Because normally he's just focusing on one thing. Now he's delegating. So like, what are your thoughts right now as Bradshaw? Bradshaw as potentially the Flyers head coach. He's always been kind of looked at as that guy like, okay, he'll be next, but do you think he can be next now?
yeah. I mean, that's a big question. Quigley and I spoke to him a couple years ago at the Flyers Carnival. Great guy, great interview. We talked about the philosophy of the power kill and just his overall defensive strategy and how he's like in the city and all that because he was relatively new at that point. And it was good to get to know him at that time. A super nice guy, and he seems like he's the good cop in that locker room. I don't really know that much about Rocky Thompson beyond that his power play is one of the worst things I've ever seen. But like as far as how he is with players and everything, I really don't know. I can't speak to that. But Shaw seems like he's very approachable, somebody you can work with. And yeah, it sounds like he was as surprised as at the Torts news as we were. I mean, we just had a podcast. I think it came out the Friday before the Torts news broke, where we were speculating about his future with the Flyers, and we all agreed that the Flyers needed to move on into the future without Tortorella, but we didn't think it would be happening next season. We thought there was a possibility, but I don't think any of us actually expected it to happen next season, let alone happen this season with there was I think 9 games left to play at that point. Now what are we at now? 6 games left to play?
Might
5 maybe?
might be 5.
We're getting down there.
It's 5. It is 5. Yes.
This
Final
has been
five.
a real slog to the end, especially the Flyers were dreadful throughout March. And then for some reason, Torts gets fired. That team goes on a winning streak, a 3-game winning streak. Very frustrating because they beat some very good bottom or very bad bottom feeders that we would have preferred they lost to. But hey, it is what it is. Matvei Mishkov was crushing it. And then they lost to the Canadiens in a really weird game last night. But all the teams that they really needed to lose or win rather at the bottom of the lineup won. So that was actually a pretty good night for the old tank last night. So it all comes down to Bradshaw, right? 3 games coached in a 3-game winning streak as he starts his Flyers head coaching interim career. And the team looked good. They looked loose. They looked like they had a lot of the fundamentals of John Tortorella's regime without necessarily all the terror that comes with being coached by John Tortorella. So I liked a lot of that. I think for me, my initial thought is with moving forward with Bradshaw, I like Bradshaw a lot. I think he can do it. I'd like to see him get an opportunity. But my biggest factor is who will be available for head coaching opportunities this offseason. Because I have a short list of guys that I would vastly prefer, but like, it's a pretty short list.
Yeah. It's a very short list. Like it's not Rick Tocchet. We don't want Rick Tocchet.
No. And I know they keep trying to connect Rick Tocchet to the Flyers, and I feel like 95% of that is just that he was drafted by the Flyers.
Yep.
He was a guy who I've said before, Rick Tocchet in his prime is like a prototypical Flyer. He scores goals, he hits, he fights. What more can you ask for as a Flyers fan? You know, he did all that, but that was a real friggin' long time ago. I looked it up the other day. I'm an old guy, and Rick Tocchet was drafted by the Flyers the year I was born, okay? So it's been a while since Rick Tocchet has played in the NHL at this point. And even beyond that, if you look at what he's done in Vancouver, right? That first year in Vancouver, outstanding results. You really can't argue with that. That team was just a couple breaks away from reaching the Western Conference Final and maybe the Stanley Cup Final, you know? That was a damn good team, and he did a good job with them. But what concerns me with Tocchet is how that team has then fallen apart since then. You know, you look at the team this year, they had to trade JT Miller because there was some sort of rift with him and Elias Pettersson in the locker room. JT Miller was a guy who was always a pretty good player, but he turned into a 100-plus point player in that Vancouver system. I was shocked by that. It's still shocking to me. And Pettersson, I mean, he's always had the skills. He's always been awesome, but he has clearly not been himself this season. And, you know, I don't like how, at least from an external standpoint, how Tocchet's handled all that. And that team has taken a huge plunge from where they were last season.
Absolutely. And Cole Keller had a great article on that on BrowStreetHockey.com. Make sure you read and subscribe there. I think you wrote that on Wednesday, why Rick Tocchet makes no sense as a Flyers next head coach. Because, yeah, he doesn't. It kind of like reeks of last decade when they had Laviolette. They're like, all right, let's bring in Berube, you know, former Flyer, kind of fan favorite type of guy. And, you know, they made that 2014 playoff run. Probably could have won the first round if Steve Mason was healthy. But, you know, brought in Berube, brought in Hackstall, just went completely backwards. And like, you don't want to do that. You don't want to bring in Tocchet because, yeah, he hasn't been a winning coach. You got the Jack Adams last year because of PDO. Like he, and this year showed exactly why you don't want him. Like he can't handle when there's, maybe he can't, maybe that's too strong to say, but like seeing that rift there, they have Quinn Hughes, an all-world defenseman, and they're still not making the playoffs. They returned home with a chance to like keep their playoff hopes alive, got spanked by the Kraken 5-0. Like,
who stink? They're terrible.
Kraken bad, yeah. So, but one thing you said about Bradshaw being the good cop, I feel like that's a big thing to hone in on because like he's been with Torts for longer than I thought. He was with Torts in Columbus, came over to Philly with them. And, you know, Torts is obviously just the default bad cop in any situation. So the players then, therefore, go to the assistants, kind of venting about Tortorella. So if Shaw wants the job, I think the player is going to be like, yeah, we like Shaw. We'll play for him. We like how he's taken Tortorella's system, like you said. But letting Michkov, you know, do his thing. Letting Tippett feel kind of more free and do more of that stuff where it's not like, oh, if you have a bad turnover, you're going to get benched or you're going to be demoted. You have that freedom. And Shaw has said multiple times now, like, He's worked with a bunch of great coaches, and he's taken from them what works, but more importantly, what doesn't work. And I feel like that's a big thing where Shaw, if he wants to take that next step, I think he has a good chance of doing so.
Yeah, I agree with that. And again, like I love his defensive philosophies. I love his, aggression back there. It's very modern as far as like puck possession versus like letting guys come into the zone and attack you. So that's a big breath of fresh air for me. So I really like Bradshaw. I like his demeanor. I think the press has been enjoying the change of pace with him from where Tortorella was. It really sounded like, from everything I've heard at this point, because we at least have a little bit of time now, a couple weeks to really like look back at everything and hear some stuff from people. From what I've heard, it sounded like Tortorella really kind of broke after the trade deadline, and he got grumpier and grumpier, sassier and sassier, whatever word you want to use for Torts at his worst, and he was just not really a pleasant guy to be around.
Why do you think that was? Because like he seemed like he was prepared for Lawton to go. Like he was talking about like he knew that was going to happen. Like, was Eric Johnson a bigger presence in the locker room than we thought? Like, was that a shock to him? Did he think they'd be getting back a roster player to help right now? Like, he knew what he signed up for, and after his final game, he said, I don't want to learn to coach a rebuilding team, but that's exactly what this is. And it did seem like there were, things piling up, and Briere even said like there's scars from things that happened in the past. So yeah, I mean, I do wonder what that ultimately, what broke him there.
Well, those scars do remind him that the past is real, and he'll tear his heart open. No more Papa Roach for everybody. But no, like, honestly, I agree with you. I think that's like really one of the weirdest facets of this entire thing is that Tortorella, just all of a sudden, like, he went from being the company man, speaking the company line about the rebuild, to being like, I can't do this anymore. I'm tired of this. I can't do this anymore. And he did say all the right things with Scott Lawton, although he didn't say it with Ristolainen. Ristolainen, he was adamant, like, we need that right-handed defenseman in there. Mm-hmm. And the whole Ristolainen situation's a little fishy to me, to be honest, because, like, it kind of lines up with his injury history, so I do get that. But, like, it is kind of weird that Ristolainen, like, disappears off the face of the earth without, like, much to say from the front office. And then Tortorella gets more and more fed up. So I don't know. You could have some conspiracy theories. You could put some tinfoil on your head. But regardless, he's missing Lawton. He's missing Eric Johnson, who didn't do anything, but I guess the vibes were good. And one of the big ones I look at also is Kuzmenko, who was a guy that we all thought Torts was going to hate. And he plugged him into second, third line duty, like, right away. He was getting power play time. He was one of the only guys providing offense. And then
he's on fire with the Kings. He has 11 points in 16 games.
That's awesome. Yeah. And I'll take that third round pick for him all day because
easily.
He's one of the most inconsistent players I've ever seen in my life. He is like red hot one season and then he's the worst player you've ever seen the next. So I'm fine moving. Also, he's near 30, right? Like, he's like 29 years old. So he's not a future asset for the Flyers. And it seemed like Torts it's funny to me that it happened this season and not last season, because I can understand last season if he was pissed off, right? Because Sean Walker was outstanding for that team, and trading Sean Walker must have been a hard decision, because if you look at them missing the playoffs, Sean Walker, I think if they have Sean Walker for the stretch run there, they probably make the playoffs last year. The Caps, that's why I don't get the Caps this year. Because they barely snuck in over the Flyers last year, and now they're the best team in the world.
Well, they took a chance on Dubois, Chikrin, all these guys, and they've hit on them. And I mean, they're rallying around Ovi. He got the record today in a loss. We'll see if the air comes out of that balloon now for Ovi. But yeah, like last year, trading Walker was a clear, like, all right, we're rebuilding. Like, yeah, like you said, they would have made the playoffs with Walker. Maybe they would have handled Risto's injury differently if they had Walker there instead of Ronnie Attard and Adam Ginning on the third pair. But I think with Shaw, the thing is, like, would you rather have him stick around as an assistant? I didn't realize he's already 60 years old. Like, he's up there too. Tortorella was the older coach. He looks great. He looks fantastic. Yeah, he looks very much like Keith Jones. They have a similar kind of face, especially with the glasses there. But, like, would you rather have Shaw just as the assistant, focusing on the defense, keeping Drysdale on his development path, having him work with Bonk? Maybe Risto's still around, keep him going until you trade him. Like, do you want to have him focus on that and bring in like a Woodcroft, or maybe a David Carr wants to come here, or vice versa, have Shaw be the head guy and bring in two kind of veteran head coaches below him.
I would be in favor of keeping him around in any capacity if he wants to, because I don't know what Tortorella's future plans are. I would kind of hope he's thinking about maybe hanging him up at this point, because like, I think he did a lot of good things the past few years, but again, I don't think he's up for another rebuild. I don't know if he was ever up for a rebuild, because I think people forget at this point that he was hired by Chuck Fletcher. He wasn't hired by Danny Briere. He wasn't hired as a rebuild coach. He was hired as a guy to take the reins from Elaine Vigneault and then take this team to, the next level. But Chuck Fletcher, of course, did 10 other moves that made no sense in accordance with that, because that was just how Chucky Two Trades did things. But Torts, I think, should probably think about just hanging them up all together, unless like a competitor wants to get, or a competitive team, cup contender wants to get him. But you'd be nuts to do that if you're a cup contender, frankly. But, Shaw, I like him a lot. I think he's a great hand to have at the wheel, a great guy to have in the locker room regardless. But you mentioned a few of the names that are out there right now. And if I'm thinking about guys I'd rather have than Shaw, Woodcroft's an interesting one. I'm kind of 50-50 on him. I'm not sure if I'd rather have him over Shaw. I wouldn't be totally opposed to him. I've heard some good stuff, but you also look at how everything ended in Edmonton, and I don't know. I'm a little lukewarm on him. The big guys for me, Carl's really interesting. David Carl, from what I've heard. I don't know that much about him, but I like what I've heard, and I like the newness of it all, because I am looking for the Flyers to get an edge in the modern NHL in any way they can, to really be a newer type hockey team, to do some new and exciting things that isn't just same old Flyers. Like when I hear Rick Tocchet, that just reeks of same old Flyers. We got enough alumni in the organization right now, okay? The president and the GM are alumni. Simmer's hanging around. Patrick Sharp, John Leclerc, Johnny Vermont. I think Bob Clark's still around. There's a million of them.
Yeah, that's what the Flyers have been, and that's what all the grumpy fans are like. No, we don't want the same old, and that's kind of why probably they're fed up with this front office being two guys that looks like the same old, and once again having to go through a coaching search here. Carl is interesting just because he has that track record of winning and track record of growing players in college and growing young players. Bobby Brink was under him. I think Massimo Rizzo played at Denver as well. But he just seems to be in such a cozy position in Denver where he's the head coach. He doesn't have to move. He has a family there. He's happy where he is. So, maybe he takes the Avalanche job at some point once Bednar's done there, but he would have to have like a very high payday from the Flyers, which they should do. There's no salary cap on coaches, and you're owned by Comcast.
That's one area where I'm never worried about the Flyers, is that checkbook.
Yeah.
I know Ed Snyder's not around anymore, right? But Comcast still likes a winning product, right? And they have some of the deepest pockets you'll find as one of the primary internet providers in the country. They have very deep pockets. So I'm never worried about the money aspect. If they want a guy, they will go out and get him. So Carl's interesting to me. The other guy that's interesting to me, and there's no word on if he'll actually be available now or not, but that's Mike Sullivan, currently the coach of the Pittsburgh Penguins. And do we know what Sullivan's current contract is with the Penguins?
I'll look that up if you can tap dance for a few.
Oh, I can totally tap dance for a minute. But Sullivan's one of those guys I really respect. If I remember I got into an argument with a guy online years ago on Twitter about baseball where he was criticizing Charlie Manuel as the manager of the Phillies. And I was saying, Charlie's not perfect, but he's a very good manager for this team. And if you think Charlie sucks, who do you think is a good manager? And the guy I was arguing with wouldn't give me an example of what he thinks a good manager is, which I thought was absurd. You can't call somebody bad if you can't think of somebody who's good at that job. And Sullivan's one of those guys that I would point to and say that is a guy who's very good at this job. What he's been able to get out of the Penguins from day one has been outstanding. I mean, what he's still getting, this lineup should have been dust years ago. Okay. Yes. Their guys are old as hell. I mean, Crosby's been torturing me for half my life at this point. It's crazy. There are people who are Flyers fans now were probably born after Sidney Crosby was already a dominant force in this league. And the fact that he could still be successful with the Penguins over the past few years, not so much the past like 2 years, 3 years at this point, but like before that, outstanding work. And the fact that they're even where they are, this should be a team that's lower in the standings, frankly. I think he's gotten more out of them than they should be giving. So I really respect Mike Sullivan. I think he's a guy who can work with the modern NHL. And I think he also at this point could probably use a little change of pace from old Pittsburgh there. I mean, he's been doing that job for a good long while at this point.
Yeah, so his contract is through the 2026-27 season, which is also coincidentally when Sidney Crosby's contract is through. So it might just be up to like Crosby if he wants Sullivan around, and if Sullivan wants to stay around, he'd be like, all right, yeah, let's play this out. Let's see if we can get another playoff run out of this Crosby, the corpse of Malkin and Letang, and
they got to let go of some of those corpses if they're going to do that.
Yeah, but Sullivan is absolutely a guy I would be very interested in. I feel like the Flyers should get him if he does become available. I don't think he necessarily will. He's been with Pittsburgh since head coaching record 2015. Won the first Stanley Cup his first 2 years there. Hasn't done really too much since. But like you said, this roster is definitely performing above expectations. So he's a guy where, yeah, you point to him, you're like, all right, go get him. But you can't go get him when he's under contract with your biggest rival. Like Woodcroft, I think, is the only good coach that's actually available. Like you have all the retreads like Boudreau and what's the other old guy's name? I forget right now. But you don't want
Boudreau's fun, but like
yeah,
he's such an offense only coach. Like I would love Boudreau like coaching my power play. I love Boudreau just as like a wacky guy to give press conferences, right? But like when it comes to coaching the full NHL team, that's just not a guy. Like when you look at football, for instance, like National Football League, you look at you have a lot of coaches, right, that were clearly better as coordinators, and Bruce Boudreau is one of those guys who reeks of that, right? Like he's a great offensive mind. He's done a lot of good offensive things over the years, but man, his teams are defensive wrecks a lot of the time. So I need some balance in there. And I just don't think Boudreau's that guy. And yeah, I'm not sure who else is out there, but this is why I'm intrigued by a guy like Carl, because like that screams to me new experience. I know they struck out with Hackstall, but like, it doesn't mean you can't not try college again. You've got to get new voices from somewhere in the game. Mm-hmm. It feels often like the same 30 guys are revolving around the NHL, and you get maybe 2 guys who can break in from the AHL or something. You know what? We should just look to our AHL team where they've had massive success over the years. And hey, Flyers alumni too. Ian LePerriere. Yeah, that's your head coach. No.
We solved it. Yeah. And Thomas points out in the chat here, yeah, Gerard Gallant is the other old head here. I was trying to think. He's more appealing than Boudreau, but he's 61. He's up there. He seems like not the next guy, maybe the next guy that you need. Because this next guy, I don't mind Shaw being here for another year, another 2 years, where he knows like, all right, I'm going to be the guy for this next phase of the rebuild. Maybe if it succeeds, I stick around. But if Sullivan becomes available, if John Cooper becomes available, someone like that, you go out there and gobble him up. Because
if John Cooper's available, you give him, that's one guy. Like that's the top of the list no matter what. He's outstanding. He's been out. That's another a guy I point to as an example of a great head coach. I pay him whatever the hell he wants because I think he's been nothing but fantastic with Tampa Bay. And look, granted, Tampa Bay does have some outstanding talent. Kucherov, Stamkos for years, Vasilevsky, Hedman, like they got a murderer's row over there. But he's also been an integral part of that team winning cups and being a competitive team every year. John Cooper's my number one if he's ever available. But
absolutely, yeah.
Tampa Bay would be making a huge mistake to ever let him go. I mean, even the team now, where they're clearly in like a weird phase right now. They just moved on from Stamkos. They brought in Gensel. Still have Kucherov playing at high level and everything. But, they're kind of in a weird in-betweener phase. But they're still making the playoffs. They're still a threat. That's still a team that they're not my top pick to make the cup out of the East. But, like, I wouldn't be that surprised if they did.
Yeah, Tampa is looking unbelievable right now. I mean, John Cooper is definitely top of the list. I mean, if he comes available, you break out the Comcast checkbook and just give him whatever he wants. But looking more at Woodcroft now, looking at like his coaching style and whatnot, the more I read, the more I would not mind him coming in as the head coach and keeping Shaw as the assistant, or maybe bringing in Woodcroft as the power play offense coach, because yeah, he coached McDavid, he coached Draisaitl. He was ultimately fired in Edmonton because they wanted to bring in McDavid's junior coach, and also because McDavid was playing hurt. The Oilers always have slow starts sometimes, so like yeah, he knows how to coach high talented players. Looks like he runs a 1-2-2 forecheck, runs a 1-1-3 in the neutral zone, which means, forces the defenseman to gather the puck on dump-ins, which I think the Flyers can do with their speedy young defenseman. I think Bradshaw can work with that. So I think Woodcroft is the only guy on the list with NHL experience that I would be like, all right, that's a good hire. Unless there's someone that comes out of left field, like I don't know other random names there, but Woodcroft, he was hanging around, happy to just hang around training camp last year. I'm sure he wouldn't mind joining as an assistant if Shaw wants to be the guy.
Yeah, and that's a big if. I mean, who really knows what Shaw wants at this point?
Mm-hmm.
He's been a long-time assistant. I think he's had interim head coaching duties before, but
Yeah.
it's been few and far between. So maybe he wants his shot. Maybe he wants. I've compared Rob Thompson to this situation before from the Phillies, where Topper took over for Girardi, had some success with the team, and ran with the job, and has become a big-time manager because of it. So maybe this could happen to Shaw late in his career. Again, I can't believe that guy's like 60 because he looked great. He looks great. Like whoever's doing his dye job is doing fantastic work. But I like a lot of what he brings to the game. And I would be perfectly happy if the Flyers ran it back with him. I think a lot of people would be pissed off, to be honest. Like, I think the fan base is looking for change in any way. And again, saying this fan base gets pissed off about something is like not really a stretch of the imagination. We're pissed off if they put out the wrong Instagram update, on something, if they just use like slightly wrong language, like Flyers fans, because, it is justified, right? It's been a franchise that we were used to making the playoffs every damn year, and we haven't made it in years at this point. We're starved for good Flyers hockey and for competency from that front office. So whatever we can get in that regard, we'll take. But I think it will be a tough pill to swallow for a lot of people to hear that a guy who's been part of the coaching staff for the past few years is going to come back and run it now. As somebody who watches this all the time and knows more, a lot about Shaw, I'm fine with it because I know a lot of his philosophies, and I'll be fine with it if he hires somebody over Rocky Thompson.
Yes.
But I think as far as just like perception, this maybe doesn't look like the most revolutionary change from the outside.
No, my main worry if you keep Shaw as the head coach is like if like next off season a good coach becomes available, and then Shaw's not going to want to go back to being an assistant. You're going to have to be like, all right, you're going to have to fire Shaw. You're going to lose him in the organization probably. So that's my one worry is like if you keep him as an assistant, you don't have to necessarily fire him if Sullivan becomes available, if someone like that becomes available next off season, or even in 2027 when his contract is up and when this team should be really truly making that next step. So that's my one worry is like you don't want to lose a good coach just to give him a chance for a year or two when you know you're not competing.
Yeah, but at the same time, like, I don't know, if you get the right guy, if you get a Sullivan or a Cooper and they have their guys that they're bringing in, I'm not going to be that heartbroken. I think you have to have a very, real conversation with Shaw if you're Danny Briere and Keith Jones, where you sit down and you say, here is our situation, and we're thinking about maybe come next season, if so-and-so or so-and-so becomes available, we will likely be moving on to them. Are you okay moving forward with this? Or should we go kick rocks and find somebody that is long-term right now? That's the big question. How much of a commitment do you want to make right now to one of these guys? Do you feel that confident in somebody like, Jay Woodcroft, right? Woodcroft, yeah.
Woodcroft, yeah.
Woodcroft. I'm questioning myself right there. But do you feel confident enough in Woodcroft that if these other guys become available in a year, you won't be kicking yourself over that? It's a tough situation to be in. And that's why it's kind of a bummer that they had to fire Torts at this juncture, and that Torts was not on board for more of this.
Mhm.
He gave his whole "I don't want to be around anymore" speech and everything, and got out of here. Like, great, but like, if he had been able to suck that up for another year, you wouldn't have to quite deal with this to this extent. So it's a really interesting situation they're in. But overall, as far as I'm concerned, somebody who podcasts about this team every week and sees what Bradshaw brings, and also has seen how the team has operated under him for these past few games. The Montreal game sucked, but Montreal's also a better team that should have beaten the Flyers.
Yeah.
And I feel like if the Flyers are a little bit better, the Flyers easily win that game, but that's a whole conversation for down the road. But overall, I have liked the freedom of the team under Shaw. I think they've played better hockey, more fun hockey for sure. And yeah, I would be comfortable with it, but I just wonder how much the organization would want to commit to him, and if this would be more than just like a 1 year thing if he was the head coach.
Yeah, I think that's the big question is, will it be? I think it would be a short-term thing unless like they took a huge step next year, made the playoffs, like did something like that. And we do have to take with these 3-4 games with a grain of salt. The Flyers are out of it. You see these teams when they're out of it, like the Sabres, like the Red Wings, like the Senators in past years, like they're out of it, no pressure. These guys go off, and like you can't really judge that completely. We saw that a few years ago with Morgan Frost and the Flyers having a decent second half. Like that's not necessarily repeatable there. And I'm looking here, doing more research here on Jay Woodcroft, and there's an article from back in October. Pierre LeBrun was on TSN saying that Woodcroft would be more appealing to a team in transition, trying to get to the next level and grow with a coach long term.
That's what we need.
And they mentioned, Utah, Chicago, San Jose as examples. And now that the Flyers don't have a head coach, it kind of seems like a perfect place to bring him in, have him coach Michkov. The Flyers are talking big game about offer sheets, big game hunting, bring in another skilled forward to play with him. And you have a coach that is skilled, is experienced coaching high talent offense. And you keep Shaw as an assistant to focus on the defense.
Is it weird also that I feel like the Flyers are better equipped than a few of those teams you just mentioned there? Like, I think the Flyers are better equipped to start competing, at least, to get to a playoff spot than Chicago or San Jose right now. I mean, they were bottom of the, standings easily. They were the worst by far. Mm-hmm. And then on top of that, I just like a lot of the pieces the Flyers have more than those teams. Like, I think the Flyers have a pretty complete defense for the most part. Like, do I want them to upgrade it? Absolutely. But when you look at that defense when it's going out there nightly, and you have Sanheim, York, Drysdale, Ristolainen when he's, operational, Nick Sealer, Emil Andre, Zamula, like, you have actually a full defense there. The upside of that defense maybe isn't quite as high as I want it to be, but that's a defense you can work with. That's a defense you can compete with. The Flyers' biggest flaw right now, I mean, obviously scoring goals and center depth, but I would say it's goaltending right now. The goaltending, it's the worst in the league. I mean, Fedotov is an abject disaster most of the time. Ersson has shown us that he really needs to be in a tandem. So I think a guy like Woodcroft could be good for this team, especially, I think they can grow a lot over the next couple of years. And frankly, I think if they can find a center, if they can trade for a guy or, draft a guy who can play sooner rather than later, we could be pushing for a playoff spot next year. It sounds audacious, right? It sounds like completely outrageous to some people, but like the team's not that far off, and the East kind of stinks for the most part. It's pretty top heavy.
Yeah, the East is bad. Like we see the Canadians now pretty much have not locked up, but they're going to make the playoffs, and like people were talking about firing Martin St. Louis earlier this year. And yeah, we've been saying it now for a few years, at least last year. Like if the Flyers had a league average power play or goaltending, just give me one of those. This team's in the playoffs, or if this team can stay healthy, they're in the playoffs. And your point about the defense, I think, is a great one that I wanted to bring up. None of the defensemen you're scared of when they're on the ice. You're like, oh my God, what's going to happen? None of them have declined at all. Steve, of the Flyers full-time defensemen, who do you think has the highest expected goals for percentage at 5-on-5?
It's highest expected, and we're talking about like against them, right? Like people scoring against them or them scoring.
They have the best expected goal share. So it incorporates expected goals for, expected goals against, and that.
Okay, gotcha. I mean, your first thought would be Travis Sanheim, but I know that's a trick question, so I'm gonna say it's not Travis Sanheim. And let's go with an out of left field. Well, no, let's just say even though he's been mid, let's say York.
York's up there. He's second of the full timers. It's Egor Zamula,
Wow.
55.88%. Emil Andre has been 57.33%. He's only played 37 games, but I was thinking last night, like watching Zamula, like he's grown as the defenseman. He hasn't made any really crucial mistakes recently. Like he's holding his own against these top guys. York's been good there as well. Like the Flyers, like you said, they have this very solid defensive core. It's just a matter of getting that upside, seeing Drysdale grow, getting Sanheim healthy and 100% because he's been playing too much, getting Risto healthy, getting Cam York. I think he's someone you definitely want to see more out of next year without Tortorella. And yeah, you and hopefully Andre can grow, because I've been a little bit disappointed with Andre in the past month or so, but nothing bad. He just hasn't reached the ceiling we thought maybe he could, and that will take time. He's still as young as Drysdale is, I'm pretty sure.
Well, and that's an area too where you have further prospects on the way that you can be excited about, because Oliver Bonk's going to be coming up in the next probably year or two. I mean, it might get some. I think he's eligible for Phantoms time next year, right?
He's turning pro next year, no matter what.
That's awesome. So, like, Bonk's a guy you're going to have to work in there at some point. So you have a really good defensive framework to work with. Like, I think you still want like a number one if you can get it right, like a true number one. But like, I think Sanheim can work with a guy much like Provorov used to work with like Niskanen, right? To make a number one pairing that necessarily wasn't perfect, but like, it worked, right? It got the Flyers pretty far, and they had a lot of success with those guys as a pairing. So I think Sanheim could work in a similar respect to that with somebody. So the defense is something that, like, I think that's closer than the offense or the goaltending to being there. The goaltending, you have irons in the fire, but like, it feels like it's going to be a couple years until you start to see like Bjarnason or Zvragin, obviously Zavagin's going to be a little bit, but Bjarnason is a guy that we might see sooner rather than later, as far as like comparatively to Zvragin. And also Kolosov, I mean, if he can maybe work on his game a little bit, he still could be a name in the mix. I know we want to write him off based off of like him being kind of a prima donna and a bit of a diva, and also like, but he's young still. He's a young guy who I think has some maturing to do, and he showed flashes. He's got speed, so Kolosov could be in the mix, but I think this is a team that there's a lot to grow into, and the big area you need to concentrate on is that center position. Shoring up that center position. A guy like Jay Woodcroft could really do a lot if they can get a couple names in there.
What is the deal with Alexei Kolosov? Because they called him up after that awful weekend from Fedotov. Hasn't played since. Fedotov got a start. Like did they not want him around the Phantoms? Did Tortorella say, I can't play Fedotov, give me Kolosov, and then they fired him? Like, if they were that close to potentially firing him, you don't give in to be like, all right, call up this goalie that was playing decently in the AHL. Like, it's just like the whole Kolosov situation since he's been drafted just has been a complete saga.
To be honest, I just mentioned him as a potential option in the short term, but I really want them to make a decision one way or the other with him soon, because I am tired of the drama. Like, I've talked more about this guy who isn't even good enough to beat out Ivan Fedotov for the backup goal. And Ivan Fedotov is one of the weirdest goaltenders I've ever seen in net.
Yeah.
So like, I do want them to make a decision one way or the other. And if he gets the AHL role next year, that's great. Perfect. I think he needs the time.
Yeah. Kolosov, Bjarnason next year in the AHL will be a perfect tandem.
But I need him to accept his fate if that's the case. Like, accept the assignment, my guy. And I don't want any more of this drama back and forth. This team can't be carrying 3 goaltenders. 3 goaltenders is nuts. No more 3 goaltenders. It's bad.
Yeah, it's not good. Martinez talked me out of it. It's good in theory where you can rotate them kind of like a pitching rotation, but it just doesn't work for goaltenders' mindsets.
It doesn't work for their mindsets, and it's just, I think, just due to the nature of the game. Like, if you were playing as often as baseball, because baseball you get one night off a week, right?
Yeah.
So the pitcher rotation makes a little bit more sense there, and I like it in theory, right? But I think just in execution it doesn't work as well. But yeah, I mean, that's going to be an interesting thing over the next couple of years that we're going to follow. But I think the bigger question for a coach coming in, and the bigger thing for this team being a playoff pushing team next year, is the center position, because the center
Yes.
position is also responsible for a lot as far as, like as far as the power play goes, right? Because we even saw this in the handful of games we got with Jet Luchenko, where Jet Luchenko didn't score, but his power play unit at times was outperforming the top unit because he was playing a lot of the little things right with center. And I think if you can get a guy like, I'm just going to throw a name that I've seen a couple times out there, like a Marco Rossi or something like that out there, somebody who can play a little bit more offensively than Coots at this point. Like, Coots has done some good stuff at 5-on-5 offensively, but he has not been a solution in the power play at all for this team. So I think if you can get a guy who can solve some of those power play issues, and hey, maybe the NHL gods look favorably upon us and we can get a guy at the top of this draft this year that maybe won't necessarily be ready to play out of the gate and do that role. But I still think, like, regardless of who you get in the draft this year, and regardless of Luchenko, I still think you need more of a bridge player, or take a chance on somebody in the trade market to try and improve the center position this year if you want to try and take a step next year.
Yeah, you absolutely need a center. And like, it doesn't have to be a 1C. It doesn't have to, you don't have to go out and get a superstar. Like Marco Rossi's point per game player, he'd be perfect. Tage Thompson is my white whale. I hope he comes. He'd score 50 here with Michkov on his wing. He's tearing it up in Buffalo with JJ Peterka and Alex Tuck.
That's my biggest thing, is getting somebody to play with Michkov, because, and I want a coach that can work with Michkov. And
Yes.
that's one of the things that's nice about, if you go with Brad Shaw as a security blanket here, is he already knows Michkov. He's somebody who has worked with him now for the better part of a season. He's somebody who understands how he plays. I'm sure he knows how to communicate with him, at least through his translator or something. He clearly knows him at this point. So I do like him in that perspective, helping Michkov, be comfortable and grow, because it's all about Mish for me. And like I was saying this the other day, it doesn't matter who you get at the top of this draft. I'm not sure any of those guys have a higher ceiling than Matvei Michkov. So Michkov is your franchise cornerstone as far as I'm concerned. So having Michkov in there and having him grow properly, and that's why I want this team to make some steps to be more competitive next season, because I want Michkov to not be discouraged. I want him to continue to grow and think the sky's the limit. I don't think you're going to discourage him regardless. Like, his attitude is outstanding. Like, people were worried about his attitude, right? That dude just hates losing. He hates failure.
Yeah. And I hated seeing it last night with the high stick on him, and no one going after the guy. Like, why is Nick Delorier on the ice? Gary Hathaway, I understand you're coming off a concussion, but like, someone needs to take a run at Lane Hudson or somebody. But getting back to the draft thing, I was laughing listening to Flyperbole when I think Quigg said he'd rather have pick 2 than pick 1, because then it's not a choice. And you were like, what about Nolan Patrick? What about that draft? You look back at that, and they got Patrick, could have got Patterson, could have got Bakar, could have got Heiskanen. But yeah, that's the big thing, is getting a center and supporting Michkov. And like, the Flyers have torn things down in the past few years. Traded away a veteran center, Lawton, traded away a few, top middle 6 wingers and centers with Frost and Farabee. I think this summer you go out, you get a nice veteran center to play in the middle 6. You get a veteran defenseman to shore things up a little bit, and you get a veteran goalie. Like, you just add one mid piece at every position, and you're right back in the thick of things.
You get that Brian Elliott 2.0. And honestly, if you get all that and Brad Shaw is your stopgap, I do think a team like that can compete for a playoff spot and maybe make it in and maybe win a round. I mean, obviously your long-term goal is to do more than that. But number one, I think you also need this to reel the fans back in a little bit, and I know that the fans want to be there, right? People want to be interested in the Flyers, and I think even just having Mishkov has raised interest across the area dramatically. Just walking along,
Mm-hmm.
you and I both live in South Philadelphia. And walking out in the streets of South Philly, I have noticed so much more Flyers gear this season than I have in the last 5, 6 years. Like, I've seen a lot more of it. I'm giving those nods to those people going like, hey, good Flyer stuff, you know?
Yeah.
And people want to be engaged. They want to be in on the Flyers. So I think you have to bring the fan base back a little bit. They want it. Like the Ducks game. The Ducks game, everybody was fired up. It was the best atmosphere I'd seen in the Wells Fargo Center since like 2018. You know, it was raucous. It was fun. It was so great to watch. And you want to see, I mean, Comcast wants those butts in the seats, right? But also Mishkov wants that. You know, Konechny wants that. Konechny feeds off that kind of stuff. And we have Konechny in his prime right now. Was a guy who should have been having, he was on a 90 plus point pace.
Mm-hmm.
And he's now what, like 70 points, right around there?
I think he might be at 69 because I feel like they haven't
Nice.
no, he's at 74 now. 74
There he is.
in 77 games. So yeah, almost a point per game player.
Yeah. So
And
like,
if he didn't go to Four Nations and he got some sort of break, I feel like he would have been much better. And also, if John Tortorella fucking put him with Matvei Michkov for more than a handful of games.
and that's one of the things, like, I know Tortorella was the guy who did that ultimately towards the end there, but like,
Yeah.
Brad Shaw, I think, is a little bit more, I guess, offensively cognizant is a way to put it, than Tortorella, where he at least seems to, he's letting them play a little bit more. He's letting them play a little bit looser. He's keeping that line together. It's been great to watch. Just, oh, you put your three best offensive players together and they do stuff. Who would have thought? That's cool. You got parts to work with is what this all comes down to. And I think some continuity is not bad. But if it is Brad Shaw, I want Rocky Thompson out. Okay.
Rocky Thompson has to go. That has to be a given. It has to be a given that Rocky Thompson is done. Bring in Woodcroft to do the power play. Bring in Andrew Brunette. I know Joe D is a big fan of him to come do the power play. Like you need someone that can coach a power play.
You need somebody who can coach a power play. You do have to have change, right? Shaw is fine as long as you change the parts with Shaw. You cannot do Shaw and run back the same exact rest of the coaching staff. You know, you need to do something different. So yeah, I mean, I'm comfortable with Shaw, but I think what it's coming down to based on our conversation here is it would be a stopgap if it was him. You know, it would be like, I don't think any of us are thinking about him as like a 5-year guy, but here's my caveat. I would be okay with Shaw as a prove it year. If he can get this team to the playoffs and win a round or something, all right, you know what? Let's ride with it. Let's give you a legit chance to move forward and do it. I'm cool with that, the Rob Thompson style. That's fine. But if you had a choice right now, okay, let's say Sullivan's not available, obviously John Cooper. I wouldn't even consider John Cooper because I think John Cooper should never leave Tampa Bay because that franchise would be nuts to let him leave. But let's say Sullivan might be available in a year, right? But this year, you have two choices. Let's say Carl also says, I don't want to come to the NHL. Okay. So let's say your choice comes down to Woodcroft or let's see what you got year with Shaw. What are you doing?
It's really tough. And I feel like it's going to come down to hopefully the players can have an honest conversation with Briere and Jonesy. Like, do they think Shaw can be the guy? Like, do they think he has the demeanor to be the guy? And you don't know if he can be a 5-year guy because he's already 60. Does he want to be coaching when he's 65? Like, and then the more we talk about Woodcroft, the more I think I want him in here. I feel like my ideal situation is you bring in Woodcroft as an assistant under Shaw, and then next year is a prove it year. That's like the best of both worlds. But if it's one or the other, does Shaw leave if Woodcroft gets hired, or is he still the defensive coach?
I mean, that also depends on Woodcroft, right? Because like, I assume most coaches, when they come in, want to bring in their guys. I'm still always like laughing about Alain Vigneault when he came in and brought in his guys, and they were all just like, ex crappy NHL coaches. Great. I coined them at the time as Big Al and the Ass Crew, and I will stand by that till the end of days because they brought a lot of ass. But Michel Therrien and oh my God, Mike Yeo,
Oh,
just a disaster in there. But the thing is, like, I think much like Danny Briere wants to bring in his own coach because Danny Briere, can't say this enough, inherited John Tortorella from Chuck Fletcher. So Danny Briere wants to bring in his own coach, which I think is maybe a knock against Shaw potentially being the guy because, like, he didn't hire him in the first place.
yeah.
I'm sure he likes Brad Shaw because how could you not like Brad Shaw, right? Like, he just seems like a cool guy, and he seems like a super nice guy. But does Danny Briere have a guy in mind that he wants to make an impact on this franchise? So yeah, Woodcroft's interesting. If Woodcroft like gels with his vibe, his philosophies for the franchise, that could be a really good fit. Woodcroft's 48 too, so that 12 years, 11 or 13-year difference there makes a big difference because he can grow with the team. He can grow with Matvei Mishkov and whoever else is to come. Oliver Bonk, Tyson Forrester still pretty young, Bobby Brink. These are names that we'll be seeing for a few years, I think. So I like the growing aspect there. I'm really intrigued by the college aspect, though. If they can get Carl in here, I think that's where I would prefer to go because I like the unknown. I like the new. I like thinking of a guy who can grow with them, but also bring some stuff that the NHL maybe hasn't seen before.
Yeah, David Carl, I think, is the top of the list. If they can somehow get him, I'm all for him. Give him the 5-year contract. He can be the guy to take this team to the next level. But Woodcroft, I'm reading more about it now. Like, apparently Darnell Nurse and Bouchard were having struggles to adapt to his stuff. So I think if Woodcroft comes in, I do want to see Shaw there as the assistant. That's the second best case. Is you gotta get Carl or you get Woodcroft and you keep Shaw. I think that's where I'm at. But if they do want to give Shaw a prove it year, I am all for it. I'm all for it. It's just you don't want to. I don't think Woodcroft's a guy that you can look back on and be like, oh, I wish we got him because he's going to go to like maybe Chicago, maybe San Jose, and then probably not even stay there. So Woodcroft isn't like oh my God, you have to go get him. But I am warming up to the idea of him behind the bench.
Yeah. But ultimately, like, I guess wonder, like, I'm okay with Shaw, but my question always goes back to, will the fans be really pissy if they run it back with Shaw? And I think there's a real possibility that could be the case.
Yeah, we see some comments here saying no Shaw. We don't want Shaw. Make sure you guys in the comments like and subscribe here to Broad Street Hockey, the YouTube channel.
I have not delved into the comments, so that's what we're getting right now. We're getting the no Shaw. We want to move on. We want something new.
There's a few people saying that. A few people, talking about drafting, trading, whatnot. Like, there's nothing too egregious here, one way or the other. But
okay, because I'm curious about that because like it is a big deal. I like the continuity, but I do understand the fan standpoint of like, no. This is a tie to the past. And if we're moving forward, let's get rid of the old stuff. Let's start from the ground up. And I really do think if it's somebody like Woodcroft, somebody with some experience, they're going to want to bring in their guys. They're going to bring in some new guys because like those are the guys they know and trust.
I don't necessarily think that as much. Like, I feel like Woodcroft probably has a good relationship with Jones or Briere because he came to training camp. So I could see him coming in without bringing in his own guys. I don't know if he even has his own guys. From what I'm reading, I'm not sure if they fired anyone else when they hired Knobloch in Edmonton. But one thing on Bonk I want to mention that I keep forgetting to is that everyone was looking at his offense this year, or last year. But this year, he was voted as the second best defensive defenseman in the conference, as well as the best shot blocker. So it's looking like he could be a two-way guy for the Flyers there. But yes, I mean, the fan base, this is Briere's biggest decision so far, I think. Like, he's had a bunch of them with trade deadlines, drafting and whatnot, but this is where he has the options. And yeah, the coaches have to agree to it and whatnot, but there's no other team trying to get over on him at the same time. This is his biggest decision. The head coach is a huge decision. It puts the face of your franchise, not Matt Michkov's the face of the franchise, but the voice behind the bench, how your team is going to play. And I feel like this decision could go a long way with the fan base either being won over by Briere or not liking him as much. And unfortunately, it's going to be hindsight bias. If the coach works out, they're going to be happy. If he doesn't, they're not going to be happy.
Oh, I mean, hindsight bias is one of the biggest problems with this fan base in general, because like everybody talks about the Nolan Patrick draft, like, well, yeah, they should have gotten Cale Makar. No shit, we should have gotten Cale Makar.
Imagine if they passed on Patrick and Patrick became Connor Bedard, like he became a superstar, like that. Like, no, you can't do that.
Yeah, I mean, it was just, again, as somebody who was around at the time talking about this every day, like Patrick was the pick. It just was, it was what it was. But, the hindsight is a very easy thing to employ in these scenarios. Like, of course, you can go back and say, yeah, they should have picked this guy, not that guy. I think the one thing we can all agree on here is that the Flyers should not get a retread. They shouldn't get one of those guys who's been around the block like 4 or 5 times. No more John Tortorellas. No more Elaine Vigneaults. No more guys who have ever coached for the New York Rangers, as far as I'm concerned. No more Rangers coaches. Done with those guys. Let's try some new blood. And it can be a guy like Sullivan. I think we're all cool with that because he's been successful. It can be a guy like Woodcroft because he hasn't been around too much. But none of those guys who have just done and been fired like 6 times at this point.
What about former New York Rangers coach David Quinn? He was with New York. He's currently an assistant with for Mike Sullivan. I think he was a part of either the Four Nations coaching staff or something like that. But David Quinn's been a guy that, he's been an assistant some places. I think he's been lauded as being a guy that can develop players. He is 58, so he's older than I thought. He's not someone I really thought about, but I feel like he's a name that could just kind of come out of nowhere a bit and be like, all right, whatever, like, sure.
He does have great hair. I'll give him that.
Yes.
I just looked up his picture. He has outstanding hair, but yeah, so he coached the Rangers and then he coached the Sharks for a couple years. Not really great results with any of them, but they also were not in the best positions.
That's when the Sharks were shit. Yeah, he coached the Sharks a few years ago.
Yeah, so I don't know. I'm not like wild about it, but you could talk me into that maybe, but I don't know. I feel like a guy like that, I'd rather just maybe run it back with like a Shaw or somebody.
I agree. Yeah, I agree there.
Going back to your point though, this is Danny Briere's biggest decision to date. He's made some big ones already. I mean, the Provorov trade was a huge one, and that was, I think, his biggest success story to this point. The Kevin Hayes one, I think, is a little underrated and a little wild when you go back and think about it, because I remember I made the argument that you can't buy out Kevin Hayes because Kevin Hayes is not going, like, John Tortorella is not going to be here that much longer. And people are like, well, Torts is part of the triumvirate that are making all the decisions. And, well, here we are. How about that? No, but Kevin Hayes is also trash at this point. Like he's I'm sure he's a very nice guy, but Kevin Hayes, as far as being a hockey player goes, I mean, the Blues basically like just handed him to the Penguins and said, "Yeah, go nuts."
Yeah, he's your problem now there. But
yeah. But like this is a big one for Briere because
it's the first like forward facing one, because like all the trades are behind the scenes, all the drafts are behind the scenes. This is something where fans, media can see the options. They know what's out there and they can kind of analyze them, which is why I'm surprised to see so many people writing about Tocchet and whatnot, because there's so many better, more interesting options out there. Maybe they won't get the clicks because they're not Rick Tocchet and controversial, but like this is a huge decision that Briere and Jones have to make. Like I feel like they're both going to make it together, but ultimately Briere will have the final say. And we're almost at the hour mark here, Steve. What percentage are you at for Shaw? What percentage for Woodcroft, and then other percentage?
I'm like a 25 Shaw, 25 Woodcroft. I'm a 50 other. Like
you want or think's going to happen?
Oh, as far as what I want, that I'm one.
Just clarify, whichever.
I want is 25, 25, 50 is where my split is at, because like I'm really unsure.
Carl that 50 is 50 that Carl? Because
I would say, Carl. I think Carl's the one who intrigues me the most. I thought you were saying just other is like the field, right?
Well, but Carl's in that field though.
Okay, well, if it came down to Carl in particular, like I think Carl, I'm probably like a 40 right now. Like, I think I'm into it. I don't know enough. That's more just me being excited about the unknown. I can be talked into a lot of these guys. I can't be talked into Tocchet. Okay. It doesn't matter how many articles you write. It doesn't matter how many. Well, he was a player. I don't care. I can't be talked into Tocchet. I'm excited about Carl just because I like the possibility of new. I like Shaw as a person.
The Carl talk reminds me of like draft talk. Like we could be talked into any draft pick. Like
I can be talked into most draft picks.
Exactly.
Yeah, I do. I just started doing my research like 2 weeks ago. Like that's. I mean, I've heard some of the names, right? But like, and now I'm really going into it, especially because there's not like a Bedard up there that's dominated the headlines. There's not a Celebrini, not a Mishkov.
Yeah.
None of those guys. So like there are names I've heard that I'm familiarizing myself with, but yeah, I could be talked into any of them. And I feel like that's kind of the same with like Carl, and I'd even throw Woodcroft into that camp of like, I'm familiar with Woodcroft, but I'm not like overly familiar. So I could be talked into him, and I wouldn't be upset if Woodcroft was the guy. And I'm not upset with temporary Shaw. I do think that they might not do that just because they do want to move onward and forward a little bit.
We saw that already.
Yeah. We've seen that. And like, I think they really want to make a declaration to the fan base. Like they ran out the catchphrase new era of orange too early. You know, they did that at the time on a year that like they should have been tanking the whole time, and they competed for a playoff spot for like 3/4 of the year. Like they ran that shit out too early. Okay. This is where the new era of orange needs to start, because now they've got Mishkov over. Okay. They've got a couple of these prospects. They've got Luchenko. They've got Bonk on the door right now. Mm-hmm. So this is really when the gear shift happens. So I think they want a coach that they can really say is definitively like their transition guy, the guy who leads them into their new era of orange, whatever the newest shade you call of the oranges.
Yeah. I think I'm kind of in a similar spot. I think like what I think is going to happen, I think it's like 40% Shaw, 30% Woodcroft, and then you got 15% Carl, 15% other. Like I feel like Shaw is probably the favorite right now, but only barely.
Here's the interesting thing is if the franchise wants to push for a playoff spot next year, do you think they go with like a Woodcroft or somebody instead of Shaw? Like if they definitively want to try to make the playoffs, or cause like, is Shaw like a stealth tank move, if you will? Like, I don't necessarily like view him as a tanking move, but like it isn't necessarily a moving forward move. So like, is them bringing back Shaw being like, we're okay having another mid-year.
Yeah. I feel like that could be it. And it's also like they have to survey the field of, are there other teams that might take Woodcroft from us, or will Woodcroft be an option, next summer to come in, or will Woodcroft come in as an assistant? Because I'm sure they're going to hire a coach by May, by June, before the draft. So whoever they hire is probably going to signal what type of offseason they're going to have. They're going to be aggressive. We know that, but how aggressive, like how high are they going to be shooting for? If it's Shaw, it probably won't be too aggressive. But if it's Woodcroft, they might go out and try to get a talented piece to play with Michkov and another veteran defenseman.
Yeah, I mean, I'd like to see a talented piece to play with Mishkov regardless, just because
yeah.
I'm tired of losing. Like as much as like I know there's a great piece, I forget his name offhand to be honest with you, but I know there's a great piece available at the top of next year's draft. Like there's supposed to be another like
McKenna.
That's it. Yes. McKenna's supposed to be a stud. So I know people want to tank and push for him and everything, but I think we're at like a real breaking point for a lot of Flyers fans. And like, I think that now that you have Mishkov over and he does special things, they want to really highlight that. And that's a guy they can highlight and a guy that makes this franchise better. I think it's going to be frankly hard to be as bad next year unless unless you don't do anything about the goaltending, because I think you just have pieces in play already. You've got TK in his prime. You've got Mishkov. You got Forrester, who keeps getting better and better, at least like his two-way game, Forrester, Brink, and Cates have been like as good like a second line as you can have for this team. And you do have a real possibility to make a push for a playoff spot next year. I don't know. You could argue all day if it's the right thing to do, but as far as being a thing they're capable of doing, they're very capable of it. And I personally, I think at this point, as a guy who's been podcasting about this team for over a decade and has seen so much losing and misses playoff hockey, I would like to see them get some pieces to complement and let's move forward. Let's move on. And that's where the Shaw question comes in. I guess the other thing before we sign off that I really wanted to also talk about is like, I don't know if there's assistance with other teams they're interested in talking on that might be in the playoffs. Cause I know like in football, that's always a big deal where it seems like every time you're successful, you lose all your coordinators because you were successful. Every year, it seems like the Eagles, when they've gone on a Super Bowl run, they will lose a coordinator or both to being head coaches. Now, the NHL, they tend to recycle more of the actual head coaches than necessarily the assistants. But I'm curious if Jonesy and Briere have their eyes on somebody who might be with a playoff-bound team.
Yeah, that's a great point. That's like when I say like, David Quinn, the Rangers aren't playoff. No, the Penguins aren't playoff bound, but he's a guy like Jessica Campbell in Seattle. Like could they go out and get her? Like that would be crazy if they were the first team to do that. Like that's what I'm saying. Like they could be just names coming out of nowhere.
That's if you're going real nuts. So man, can you imagine the comment section if that happened? Like, I'm intrigued because, like, I want something new, and that's definitely new. But I don't even think I'd want to see the comment section if they did that, just because I know how some hockey commentators can be.
Yeah, but yeah, next season they're
not everybody. Most of you guys are cool, but there's an occasional person who ain't cool.
Yeah, there's people out there. Yeah, but like next year, they're not going to be bad enough to tank for McKenna. This year, they're 20 points better than the Sharks and Blackhawks. Like they're clearly better. You would need a ton of injuries plus bad goaltending again to even have a chance at that top pick. Or I mean, you can always move up from 10 to 1, but like it's very unlikely there. So yeah, I want to see fun hockey, but I want to see fun winning hockey because
winning hockey, and it's all about developing number 39, MM39. And how you up his game. Because I think a lot of us feel strongly that if you had a better power play and you had a more offensively minded coach in there this season, that Mishkov would be a more viable Calder candidate this season. I think
he absolutely would be. He has one of the best 5-on-5 points per 60 in the entire league. Like it's like top 50 the last I checked, so if not better. And he's up there with Hudson. And if they had a decent power play, he could be sniffing 70 points right now.
He's unbelievable. And I really believe that any coach coming in, that's my biggest factor. Whatever coach is coming in, you have to be able to work with this kid and maximize him because he is your Philadelphia Flyers now.
Is it just up to Matvey if he likes Shaw as a head coach? The Flyers are going to bring him back. Is it just up to Matvey now? Like Shaw knows how to coach him. Shaw has kind of unlocked something the past few games.
To be honest, if Matvey gives him that thumbs up, he's getting my thumbs up.
That's all that matters. And you guys in the comments should be giving us a thumbs up. Hit that like button on this video. Make sure you subscribe.
You're going for those likes big time, and I appreciate it.
Yeah, we got Jared in the chat wants Alex Tanguay. Is he an assistant head coach somewhere right now? He's
my God, that's a name from that is a blast from the past. Colorado Avalanche, right?
I don't know. Yeah, Colorado Avalanche, Alex Tanguay. I don't know if he's coaching somewhere right now, but
who did
he's in Detroit, Jared saying here in the chat.
Oh, okay. I'm trying to remember who Bill Matz brought up with me when I podcasted with him on PHLY recently, but I think it was Sergei Fedorov was one of them. And the other one was, I can't remember. I think it was Zhamnov, maybe.
Probably some other Russian guy. What's Kovalchuk up to?
What's Kovalchuk up to? I mean, hey, does Ovi want to just jump from having the all-time goals record to coaching a team? He can do that.
Yeah, Zhamnov. Yeah, that's just pretty good. But what's Briz up to? You're still paying him until what?
I want no part of Briz I don't know anything about him as a potential coach. I don't need to know anything. Briz is nuts. I just want him as like Gritty's best friend and nothing more.
What if it is Briz in the Gritty suit this whole time?
That would be awesome. I wouldn't be that surprised because Briz is a pretty good athlete. Like he's not a good goaltender, but he's a good athlete.
Yeah. Yeah, he's a good athlete. He's got the antics down.
Why you have to be mid?
Yeah. So I guess the question of this was, should Brad Shaw be the Flyers head coach next season? Yes or no, Steve, on the spot?
No.
You're saying no, but yeah, you're saying
I'm not like, it's not a strong no. It's a
it's
weak
not.
no.
Yeah, it's not against Shaw. It's not against the Shaw.
I want new.
Shaw, the coach. Yeah,
I want new. That's my biggest thing. But I really like Bradshaw, and I'm not going to be mad if it's him.
yeah. I really just want him to stick around as an assistant. If that can happen, and bring in Woodcroft, bring in some other assistant, bring in whoever, I'd be happy with that. I want Shaw as a part of the staff, no matter what, just for what he's done with Drysdale. I think he'd be happy to do that. But if it's Shaw's either like head coach or gone, I think I'd rather have him be the head coach, see if he can have a prove it year, and then, a year or two down the line, go out and get someone better.
Right. And I'm okay with that mainly because like there isn't a Sullivan or a Cooper that I think is a slam dunk. If there was a slam dunk, that would be fine. There's a bunch of guys that I'm like, it sounds nice.
Oh, there's a slam dunk in the comments. Gary Nabbit said, "Bring back Roddy after Carolina fires him." I know he just signed a huge contract, but like,
yeah, I wish if Roddy hadn't signed that contract, he'd be number one with a bullet. Rod the Bod flexing on the bench would be the greatest thing. And oh man, I would be all about it.
I mean, if Carolina doesn't make the Stanley Cup final soon, I could see them going with a new voice. So he could be someone that's available down the line, hopefully.
Oh, I would love to bring him home. Bring him home. Yeah. Let's do it.
Yeah. All right. Any final thoughts here, Steve, before we tell the good people where to follow us?
I think I got all the thoughts out, but yeah, man. I mean, it's exciting. It's very nebulous at this point. And again, I wish stupid Tortorella, who I'm glad he's gone, but at the same time, I wish he had just held on until the end of the season and just played out the contract and then just, sucked it up and did it, because like, I feel like he he got fired too early, because I do think that they didn't want to be making this hire at this point. But man, it's going to be interesting at the very least.
Yeah. I mean, we talked about it. Like, yeah, I was saying, like, just let Tortorella play out the contract, see what happens next offseason. But if he was rubbing guys that much of the wrong way and crossed the line, you got to get rid of him. And I don't hate seeing Shaw get a chance here for 9 games. See what he can do. See if he can handle being a head coach and, go into the offseason with at least a little bit more intel.
I mean, between Cam York and just, I don't know, some of the people around the building just did not sound like he was a very loved figure at the end there.
No. So, yeah, it was good to move on from Torts. Hopefully we can find another good coach behind the bench soon here. All right, Steve, where can people follow you?
You can follow me over at Flyperbole. Got a couple podcasts coming out each week, so you can look for a flight. But I think we're doing Tuesday recording for Wednesday release this week, because they're playing Wednesday this week. I got the Flyers 5 coming out Monday, and might be on PHLY post game soon, just so stay tuned for that. Oh, wow. How about that?
Wow. Yeah, you can follow me on Blue Sky at RyanGilbert.bsky.social. Should be having a Broad Street Hockey podcast with Joe, the Bean Man, DeMarini, probably Monday, maybe Tuesday. We're gonna try to not do the same day as Flyperbole again, because that's not good for the old.
I waited a little. I gave you a couple hours.
No, you did. Yeah. But yeah.
I agree with you. I agree with you.
We're trying to go back to our Mondays, I think, for Broad Street Hockey podcast.
Well, we've been trying to do Wednesdays, but we've had some scheduling conflicts with the Wednesdays lately. So we usually would do like Wednesday or some other day, but the Flyers play Wednesday, so can't happen.
Yeah. So make sure you like and subscribe. Plenty of great content out there, shift by shifts. Going to be doing some draft profile stuff, so make sure you subscribe to the Broad Street Hockey YouTube channel. And until next time, thanks for watching.